I'm Fiona Curran. I'm working on a permanent sculptural commission for Locke for their new hotel at Eddington, which will be opening in September. The main ideas for the project came from looking at the archaeological history of the site, and I was particularly interested in the shapes that are cut into the landscape when archaeologists do their digs. The archaeological unit at Cambridge University have been excavating the site for around 20 years. So the research that I started to undertake really looked at this process of the archaeological uncovering. So there are these wonderful kind of patterns and shadows that are cast on the landscape, both at the ground level and then also the aerial perspective, which also picks up shadows from former settlement use. So those were the main things that really sort of fed into this, and that sense of multiple histories and deep time that are revealed through archaeology. And then also, there's the astronomical perspective through Eddington's interest in astronomy and mapping the theory of relativity, through taking photographs during a complete solar eclipse, and how that captured the curvature of light through the movement of stars over time. And that helped to map the measurements that were required to prove Einstein's theory of relativity. So this sense of these kind of shadows on the landscape from both this ground level perspective, from the aerial perspective, and then also this notion of much more spatial perspective moving on up into the sky. The title of the work is Bright Shadows Point, and that refers both to the shadows that are cast on the landscape through former settlement uses, which are indicated through the archaeology, both from the aerial surveys and from the digging. And also it refers to the shadows that were cast from the solar eclipse. So the artwork is absolutely site-specific. It developed very much from research into the history of the place at Eddington and where it was going to be situated. And it was commissioned by Locke very specifically for the public parts of their building, particularly the three routes from the outdoor spaces into the inner garden courtyard. So I worked very closely with the architects DRMM on their designs for the building and this wonderful landscaping that they've got for this inner garden courtyard, and really thought about how to position something that was going to help people to kind of navigate through that space into this beautiful courtyard that was there for everybody to use. The process of the work really happens through a period of research, and in this case it was very much about the archaeological and astronomical history of the place in relation to Eddington. And then I take that research back to the studio. And one of the things I use primarily in my studio practice is forms of collage and assemblage, and bringing sort of things together and thinking about kind of correspondences between ideas and materials. And then from the studio practice, where I'm making models and maquettes, I then have been communicating with the fabricators, MDM Props, and we've been talking about scaling up and different kinds of materials that we might use for this particular project. And then obviously looking at them in relation to the site, so communicating with the architects, DRMM, positioning the sculptures within the site in relation to the public spaces on the outside and then the public spaces on the inner courtyard of the hotel with the garden area. So the three sculptures are positioned in such a way that they invite people to move through them and to actually kind of navigate a path through into the garden. And that was something that was really important to me in thinking about how they were positioned. So one of the things that I did was I mapped the shapes in the landscape and took them from this horizontal perspective and then orientated them up to the vertical perspective. So it's a way of kind of abstracting this sense of encounter with a digging down into the earth and then bringing it up into the kind of vertical plane through shape and through colour and the way that the light captures the sculptures as you move around them. I particularly enjoy working on site responsive commissions because I think it gives you an opportunity to narrow your research and to go quite deep within your understanding of a particular location. And I think then for Locke, the way that they work with artists in different communities at different places where they're kind of developing a hotel site, I think there's a really enriching kind of experience on all sides, really, because what it does is it brings that local narrative. But within a local narrative, of course, there are these multiple histories, as have been revealed through these archaeological digs stretching back thousands of years of history contained within these spaces. And so we think of this as a new development, but of course it's an old development. And I think that sense of spending time with the particular place really kind of lifts all of this very much into the surface of the present.